I made a commitment about 3 years ago that I would no longer teach or lecture or even do online webinars without integrating into it times of meditation and quiet and focus on breathing. And there have been several times when I've moved into a space and it seems so antithetical. When I taught a law school course, what an honor, at Seattle University Law School, I began each of my classes with 10 minutes of meditation. And it felt like a risk, and I had no doubt that it was going to pay off, and it did. And I've done CLEs again at Seattle University, and each time I do them, I make sure that there's a space when I'm still and we're still together, and there's time for quiet. And I have such a belief in that as being a necessary element of 21st century lawyering. It's about consciousness, and I think consciousness really begins with a kind of mindfulness, however people find that. For me, I can be still and focus on my breathing. And for others, it might be a walking through nature. It could be whether yoga, any number of things. And I know Len Riskin has talked and written eloquently at length about this, and he has both influenced me and inspired me in that. Mm-hmm. The feedback from the students at the end was quite stunning. I realized that there was such a hunger in that setting for the ability to go to that quiet place within themselves and to allow themselves to touch into what for many of them was what brought them to that law school in the first place. And so I think both their own experience of themselves in law, as well as the conversations we were able to have in that class, as well as what they were taking to the internships where they were, made it seem as though the payoff was apparent. And I think that was a perk I didn't expect, that the stories they brought back, what they wrote about their own experience, and in the conversations with them. And for many of them, what I loved is, these are analytic, wonderfully left brain, and for them to talk about the discomfort that they had in that 10 minutes that seemed like an eternity for the first few times, and how, as they wrote about it later, that they looked forward to that opportunity, and that then they started integrating that in their own way into their studies or whatever else. So there was something about the conversation that was able to emerge that I think was a little different than it would have been if we hadn't had that time of quiet together on a regular basis. I have the sense that place and experience, we are whole individuals, not just mind, body, sensations, and all the rest. So it wasn't just the meditation I tried to integrate to that class. I wrote flowers every time. And as they came into the room, I had music playing, often classical music or something. And I had the sense that, because I know that places where I am can create a shift in how I show up, or what's possible, or allow for greater opening. And so it was an opportunity, I think, to try some of those things out. I'm thinking about how important context is to me. And so I guess I can only go I trust my own learnings are not just what I read and what my head can tell me, but also what I can experience. So I think that the context, and I'm thinking whether it was my law office, and I was both, as in-house counsel for an oil and gas company, and then I was general counsel for a nonprofit institution, and I had my own solo practice. But in each of those places, I tried to create something that was, and I don't know if I would say it healing, but that it would somehow feed my spirit and soul, and hopefully those who were going to be in that space. So I do believe that flowers, plants, nature. I do believe that music, I mean, I'm talking about reflective background, soft music. I do believe that art can inspire. And so I think wherever it is, I try to create that. And one of the challenges when I was doing continuing legal educations for law schools, and when I taught my own class, that setting did not particularly have the soft colors or the flowers or the music. And so I carried those with me. And what I found was that I could go to whatever setting and at least influence it in some way. And so in the same way that I got more and more clear that I wanted anyone who was present for something I was, I think, more facilitating than leading, but in some way being present for, that I would want them to experience something that would lift their soul or feed their soul. And I think that the humanities do that. I often quote poetry, whether it's David White or Mary Oliver. There's just, I think, something that touches the heart when the language is in a poetic form. So yeah, I like that image of what can we do in creating a context that feeds the healing that we want to do as lawyers. Yeah, I'm aware of how very different the focus on, whether it is the poet or the flowers or the music or the art, it's all very right brain, and very much of the legal profession and what people seeking lawyer services often is the analytic, just the facts. I want you to win this case for me. And so I think there is something that I've had to work on in a balance, and maybe this was my challenge all through law school, is how does one embrace this profession and do the wonderful logical, analytical, and adversarial work that needs to be done, but have that tempered by this other, which is the right brain, which is, and again, I was invited to make some presentations to the Washington Women's Attorneys Association, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to go so far as to say, are we trying to feminize the legal profession? And I drew back from that because I really think it is a matter of balance. And so I don't want it to be all the feminine aspects. And I think because I'm married to a therapist who has many of the wonderful skills of collaboration and listening and working on connections, and he's very much a man, so it's not necessarily the female or feminine. But I think that blending or that balance of the two is something that I love seeing it happen in the profession. And I have a confidence about that it is emerging. And it's not because of me or because of any individual. It's just the time has come for this to happen. And so I absolutely delight in what Kim is doing around cutting edge, around what Susan Dykoff is doing, around her vectors, around what Len Riskin is doing around mindfulness, and just this wonderful emerging of so many of the focus on, I think, a more humane, a more caring, along with the rules of our profession.